think I'm live, and I think everybody is in their bedrooms. There's only two other people here right now. Just my grandma and my aunt. And the dog, Daisy. But, my grandpa is somewhere. I think he's at work. I'm actually not sure. No, it's Sunday. Yeah, I have no idea where he is. Come to think of it, he might even be here somewhere. I have no idea. Doesn't matter. And my mom is off at the cottage that I was at for a couple weeks, which is why I had to do those premieres instead of actual live streams. So, anyway, this one is about Pride Month because it's Pride Month. I've only been doing this for 28 weeks because this is the 28th episode, and that means that last Pride Month I was not doing this. So this is kind of my first chance to talk about it. And I was not sure. Yesterday I was thinking about what topic I should pick for today, and I was like browsing my mind. What am I passionate about? What do I have a lot to say about? What am I annoyed by? And every time I think of an answer, I think, no, I want to do that as part of an episode of my other show, Turbo Topics. I don't want that to be part of Fallen World. So I was like, what can I talk about for Fallen World? Should I just sit and talk and not really put an episode in? Because I'm kind of like done with this show after a couple more episodes. Justin, I do remember you. Hello. I haven't heard from you in a while. Anyway, yeah, so I picked this topic because I realized that this was what was on my mind and what I had a lot to say about. So here we go. I don't know if something just floated past me. I just saw it in the reflection. Not the reflection in the camera, because I can see myself. I do these on my phone, and I think it works pretty well. I'm gonna stop wasting time. So, what I covered today was, in chapter 3, I covered a lot of the reasons that people are against pride or pretty much anything LGBT, because there's a lot of different reasons for it, but we're going over that in chapter 3. In chapter 2, I'm covering something that I kind of just heard from a comment and on a post that I saw, and it just made me realize it's almost connected to chapter 3, but it's still not exactly the same thing. And chapter 1 is called Tolerance and Acceptance, and it's about kind of what that post was about that I saw that comment on, and it's all kind of generally about the same thing. It's about reasons that people have to be against Pride Month and against Pride in general or whatever it is. And I just think it's important to talk about it. So, something that I just wanted to say, just to get it out there, that how I wrote it was that to tolerate or accept a minority is to suggest your position of authority. And I realized after I wrote it that it rhymed, so I was like, I'm definitely going to have to make sure I don't paraphrase in the video, because sometimes I do that. I write my notes, but I don't, the notes aren't really, they're just for me, just reminders of what I want to say, so I don't have to read them exactly as they're written. But sometimes if I say something like that, I'm like, I want that in the video. The second thing that I wrote was that we're all the same when we're dead. So inferiority doesn't justify murder, which I think is an interesting statement on its own, that we're all the same when we're dead. And then you just picture a bunch of people fighting over who is inferior or who's superior, who's better, who's worse. And then they all kill each other, and then they're all dead. And then they're all the same. Just a bunch of lifeless bodies, which is really kind of sad to think about, but that's kind of just the reality we're living in. Superiority is an illusion because we're all cut from the same cloth. We're all made of the same material, which is why if we're all dead, you're just going to see a bunch of lifeless bodies. And where we get the idea of superior, inferior um, comes from what we're able to do. We all have talents. We all have things that we are good at and bad at. Areas where we are um, I don't know, just areas we can specialize in, and then areas where we kind of have some setbacks. Like some people are really good at singing, but they're really bad at writing songs, and some people are really good at writing songs, but they're really bad at singing. And that's just a good example of how not everybody has to be, it doesn't mean that you're better than them just because you can sing, but you can't write songs. And then there's people who think that they can do everything, and they want to assert that, say, that makes me better than you because I can do everything and you can't do anything. But what you're supposed to be doing with your talents and your abilities are finding where they fit in a kind of community, seeing how you can use them to help a community and, your community, the people around you. We're all a community. We're all cut from the same cloth, as I was just saying. So by community, I just mean everybody, your fellow human beings. And people don't do that. They use it to put their fellow human beings down instead. So then your abilities are kind of useless, which is the real issue, is that you say, I have all these abilities, I can do all these things that you can't do, but so what? So what? What are you going to do with these abilities? Sure, you have things that you can do that maybe other people can't do, but why does that make you better than them? What are you going to do with all these abilities? Use them to put other people down? Well, that doesn't make you better than anyone. It just makes you an idiot. And you're not happy as you're doing that. You cannot be coming from a place of anger, being miserable about something or at someone, or angry about something or at someone, and also happy and fulfilled at the same time. You're miserable. You're just a miserable person. And that's your own problem. So no, I do not think you're superior. I think you're an idiot. So yeah, if you want to tolerate or accept a minority, whether it be someone's race or gender or sexual orientation, whatever it is, people think that the bare minimum is more than enough, which says a lot. And this kind of leads me into chapter 2, which is called Entitled and Overindulged. This was this comment that I saw where this person said that he didn't say this in the initial comment, but he replied to other people who were replying. I never reply to comments. I see them on anywhere I am, Instagram, YouTube, whatever site I'm on. If I see a comment, I never reply to it. I don't engage in conversations like that because, I just think about this. Have you ever seen someone on their deathbed saying, I wish I spent more time arguing on the internet? That's all I'm going to say. So, yeah, this person was saying that the LGBT community is overindulged, and by media and representation, and there's all these things that they're that kind of in their favor, and it kind of felt a lot like people who are just disgusted by like pride parades, and they're like, it felt like a religious stance, but it wasn't. This person said, I'm not against LGBT. I just don't think that all of this representation is necessary, and that they're being entitled, and that they're overindulged by media and representation and everything. So I wrote that Pride Month is exploited by media and business corporations, and they think that if they just slap a rainbow on everything, it makes them an ally. They think that they can just say, well, here, we're selling a bunch of rainbow products, and saying pride, then suddenly that means we're supporting you, but really all we're doing is draining your wallet. We're just trying to get you to buy a bunch of shit that you don't need, which is just what happens every other day of the year. Anyway, they just want you to spend money you don't have on things you don't need, and they just lump Pride Month into that. And then the people who have other issues project it onto that and say, well, it's because of this. And this guy said, this is what I was mentioning that he said in one of the replies. He said that he was molested by other students in a cafeteria when he was in school. I'm not sure how old he said he was, but he said that there were a bunch, like I think he said three LGBT students molested him, and that it's, he was saying things like, oh, well, that's because they're LGBT, then that's just, they have trauma and they have issues, and you're not supposed to, be mad at them, or you can't be a victim because you're a straight white male or something. And I was thinking, like, does he think that that's what people say? Have people said that to him? And God forbid somebody actually said those things to him, but I'm sure he's just heard those things and assumed that that's what would be applied to him in his situation. So I want to say, first of all, everybody has problems. Everybody has reasons for doing the things that they do. It does not excuse the behavior. There are, it doesn't matter what you are. If you hurt somebody else, it doesn't mean that you're an evil, horrible person who deserves to be thought of as a monster and punished or killed. It means that you made a bad decision because you have issues that you haven't dealt with. You've made lazy decisions. You've made easier decisions instead of looking inward and doing the hard work and figuring out what your problems are and just healing. It's unhealed trauma that's causing you to make bad decisions. And that's out of fear and laziness, not wanting to actually do the work. So we have that as a bigger issue, people making the easier decision. But they still need to be held accountable. You still need to know if you hurt somebody else, it doesn't just go unnoticed. You can't just walk around and step on other people's heads and then still get to where you're trying to go. If you step on other people, they're going to eventually move out of your way and you're not going to have anywhere to step. There's going to be kickback to every decision you make. And sometimes it is our job to carry out that justice. Sometimes it is our place to defend ourselves or to just carry out karma. But other times you have to say, there's nothing that I'm supposed to do. It would be going out of my way to do something that it's not my job. And then you just have to give it up to karma and trust that that person will learn whatever they need to learn. And your only job is to keep them away from you. Put up your own boundaries. And we don't have a lot of systems in the world, a lot of law systems that are kind of set up like that. It's usually this mentality of, you do something bad, you're a bad person, you deserve to be punished. And that's not a good way to think about anything. But that certainly does not exclusively apply to LGBT people, which is what this person seemed to think, that because he was a straight white male, he can't be a victim. Well, unfortunately, straight people are often victims, people who aren't minorities. And the reason for this is that you can't be part of a world that is so based on greed and selfishness and not be affected by it. There are so many things that we teach people. We put this idea, and not just in my country, but all over the world in different ways. You come into the world and there is a certain cookie cutter mold that you're supposed to fit into. And they tell you who you are, and they tell you where you're supposed to fit. And out of fear, you kind of have no choice but to try and fit in there. And then when you get older and you feel safer to kind of explore and just break free from that mold, now you have to do all this work of figuring out who you really are and how much of who you were was just for your protection and how much was actually yourself. And straight men suffer from this the most, I think, because there is so much floating around about what a man is supposed to be that makes him closed off from his emotions and very hard-headed and stupid, just plain stupid. And we're taught that that's the way that we're supposed to be. And a lot of people just get sucked into that and they make it who they are. They lose themselves completely. And with LGBT people, um, it's a lot harder for them to lose themselves in that way because they have to they really feel like they would be completely losing themselves, and it hits a lot harder, so they kind of are forced to do that hard work and to look inward and say, this isn't really who I am. Whereas straight people, especially straight men, don't really have to look inward and do that kind of work because they, they're not really that terribly affected by it, at least as much as they're aware of. So they're just kind of stuck there, which is really sad. At least LGBT people have it so much worse that they're able to use that to kind of break free from it and then figure out who they actually are. But it's hard to wake up and realize that you're living in such a messed up world, and then to feel like you get stuck in small talk. Once you realize what's actually going on in the world, small talk is nauseating. You can't just sit there and talk to someone about the weather, and God forbid politics or religion comes up, because you're going to have a lot to say on that. And the person talking to you, when they brought it up, did not think that it was going to become an interesting conversation. They thought that it was just going to be, and by the way, Jesus said this, and by the way, this person that I support did this and said that, and this political agenda that I believe in did this and said that. And they just think that you're going to go along with it. Otherwise, they wouldn't bring it up. Nobody wants to engage in an argument. Which is why at Thanksgiving, when a bunch of family members come around, you don't talk about these things. It's swept under the rug. So for all you know, you could be sitting across the table from someone who has completely different views from you, views that maybe even are harmful, and you just have to keep your mouth shut about it. You can't say a word, and it's really sad. So the last thing that I wrote under chapter 2 is that if you're not a minority and you think that minorities are overindulged, look in the mirror. If you think that LGBT people get too much representation, understand that it is literally a small percentage of what's represented. This is what pisses me off. When straight parents say, I'm not letting my kids watch this show because there's a gay character in it, or there was a gay kiss in the show, and I don't want my kid to turn gay. Do you realize that in every single show ever, there were straight people? Every other character is straight, and between a male and a female? And do you see a bunch of kids turning straight from looking at that? Believe me, if who you were attracted to was a choice, everyone would choose to be attracted to the opposite sex, because that's what's societally acceptable. That is where they wouldn't have to do all of this extra hard work, and they would have the privilege of just staying asleep to how messed up the world is. And sure, they would still be negatively affected by it, but not to that degree. And they would definitely choose it. No one would choose to be part of a minority. It's not a choice. That's the whole issue. You're stuck there. You just come into the world and there you are. You're thrown into this. And there are so many people who refuse to remember that we're all cut from the same cloth. And like what I was talking about in chapter 1, just want to believe that they're better than you in some way. Which chapter 3 is called Religion and Statistics. And these are the main reasons, I think, that people are against it. And, you know, the first 2 chapters are coming from the people who say that they support it. The people who say, I'm pro-LGBT, but, or the people who say, I accept you, I tolerate you, I tolerate LGBT people, or, you know, their kid comes out to them and they say, I accept you. Oh, well, thank you very much. Thank you for accepting me. I didn't realize I had to earn your approval. You superior being. And people just don't think about how harmful these things are. So the first 2 chapters are for the people who think that they're allies. And chapter 3 is for people who know that they're not, the people who are actively against it. And these are the main reasons for it. So, of course, religion is the primary thing used to justify bigotry, and it's used to justify so many strange things that, religion is generally all about positivity and health and love and acceptance and all sorts of things. Love thy neighbor as thyself, blah, blah, blah. Um, there's all sorts of things in all sorts of religions, and that's generally the only thing all religions seem to have in common, is that it's about how to live your life in a healthy, productive, and positive way. And all religions are against murder. And yet, if you look at history, religion is one of the leading causes of death. It's just all sorts of religious people killing each other because they all have different beliefs. Wait a minute, you believe this, but that's not the truth. I have to kill you. We can't share space together. You don't believe in the same version of God that I believe in, so I'm gonna kill you. So, even though all religions are generally against murder, I'm sure not all, but most, it seems to be pretty negotiable. and and even though religion tells you to love everybody and love your neighbor, and that it's not your job to judge someone, that's God's job. You're just supposed to make sure that you're not sinning, and that you're spreading the word of the Bible, I guess, for Christians. But at the same time, it doesn't say that if someone is sinning, you should hate them, that you should personally judge them, that it's your job to carry out that justice. That doesn't make you a good person, and you're certainly not happy while you're doing it. It's like I said, it's really impossible to hate and be happy at the same time. So you're just this angry, bitter, miserable person looking at all the things you hate in the world, refusing to look inward for the reasons that I talked about in chapter 2. You don't have to. You're not so hurt by it that you kind of have no choice but to face it. You have the ability to look away, which ultimately hurts you even more. But it's just sad. That's what privilege is. It doesn't mean you're better. It doesn't mean you should feel guilty. If you're privileged, it means that you don't have it so bad that you have to look inward and do the hard work on yourself. But then the fact that you don't have to means that you most likely won't. And that's an even bigger tragedy than anything. So it's really sad. And then there are people who, I shouldn't say have to, because there are plenty of minorities who still refuse to look inward and do the hard work. There are plenty of minorities who choose to stay asleep. But I think for the most part, minorities are kind of like, okay, something is clearly wrong here. And they look at the world and they're able to just see all the faults without being afraid. And they're able to look at themselves and see everything that's there. They don't have to just wear rose-colored glasses. So, religion isn't the only thing, though. A lot of people say, well, it's a sin, so not under my roof, or stuff like that. But generally, there is this other crutch that non-religious people use to justify being hateful and bigoted, and that is statistics. And I see this for racism too. People will point out statistics and say, look at this on this website here that I sent you. It says that this race is 30% more likely than this race to do this or that. Or they'll say LGBT people are the only people affected by, or the majority of people affected by this disease, or the majority of people who do this, or who, I don't know, like rape in prisons or something, like all sorts of things people come up with. I was gonna say come out of nowhere with, but they're not really coming out of nowhere. But there's so many things that I've heard that just blows my mind, and people use this to feel justified in being miserable. Why would you want to do that to yourself? You have to remember, it's not about other people. This isn't about accepting a kind of person that you don't like. This is about you and your own joy. You're depriving yourself of being joyful and healthy in life because you'd rather be miserable. You'd rather feel responsible for carrying out justice. A justice that you really don't know too much about. You basically just read a book or tried to study, but you were coming from a biased place. And this is the other thing that interests me so much, is how people refuse to acknowledge how philosophy, psychology, and politics are all intertwined. And you can't really have one without the other, because psychology and philosophy are behind a lot of the political things that people fight for. And it's sort of like what I said in chapter 1, when you're saying, like, um, I have all these things that makes me better than you. Well, so what? What are you going to do with all these things that you have? Why does that make you better than me? And then they're like, well, because it does, because I have more than you, and that makes me better. Well, why does that make you better? Because I can do more than you. Okay, well, what are you going to do? What's the point of anything? You have to get philosophical eventually. Otherwise, you're just lying to yourself. And then you have to figure out what the point of anything is, and really go deep and figure out these questions. And then you have to look inward, psychology, and figure out what kind of traumas you have, what unhealed things, what if you have some other reason. You say, well, I don't like this because of this, and you put this external logical reason behind it. But really, it's coming from an internal place. And if you study psychology, you'll see that there are a lot of psychological reasons that people choose this. And that's the third thing that I wrote, is that if it's not statistics or religion, it's just personal disgust and hatred, which is what it really is at the end of the day, because we're afraid of things that we don't understand. We're afraid of change. And it's because of culture. It's the way things that are encouraged. And we're also afraid of admitting that we're wrong. The thing with, like, pronouns, a lot of people don't like the idea that there are they them pronouns, or that you can put your pronouns in your bio on Instagram now. They added a feature where you can just add them in their own section. And I saw somebody say something like, sorry, I'm conservative, so I'm not doing that. And I thought to myself, okay, so then you wouldn't mind if I started using she, her pronouns with you, right? You wouldn't mind if I just assumed your pronouns? What if I just started calling you they, them? Because you didn't put your pronouns in your bio. When you put your pronouns, you're telling someone how you want them to refer to you. And everybody has a preference. If you truly don't have a preference, you can say that. But, then that person clearly had a preference. That person clearly thinks that people should be judged based on how they look, or based on their bodies. And, if that's the case, how would you like it if everyone just started using the opposite pronouns based on how you look? Would you get offended? Okay, well then, how about you take the responsibility of letting people know how you want to be referred to then? It's that simple. And it's not that hard to fix your language, because it's not that big of a deal. It doesn't matter. I understand that when you look at someone who generally presents as male or female, and they use they, them pronouns, it can be hard to get used to that, especially if they went by something else before. But it's not a big deal. You're not going to get killed for it. You're not going to be judged, or it's not your problem. It's their life. It's their name, their pronouns, their decisions. It's just make sure that you're trying to be respectful, instead of just getting lazy and saying, I don't care. It's not worth it. I'm just going to call you what you look like to me, or what you used to go by, because it doesn't matter enough. It's not worth the effort. Think of how insulting that is to someone. Or to tell them to try and psychoanalyze them, because you refuse to psychoanalyze yourself. So you'll say, well, you're crazy. It's a mental illness. There's something wrong with you. Okay, would you really rather psychoanalyze someone else than just look inward? Yeah, that's what everybody does. That's why people go to war, because it's easier to fight a country that you don't like than to actually acknowledge the fact that if you met everyone in that country and shook hands with them and got to know them all individually, you wouldn't be able to bomb them. You'd be like, hey, I know those people. I can't kill them. But you don't know them personally, so it's easier to justify it. There you go. So the personal disgust and hatred comes from just what we're taught. We look at things that we're unfamiliar with and we say, oh my God, that's disgusting. Or that usually, ironically, is connected to religion. And it's sad, because I think religion had potential to be a beautiful thing, but it turned into a cult. religions nowadays are just cults, and they used to be um, forms of belief sets about how things work, and they were healthier. Like natives from America, there were all sorts of different traditions that they had and belief sets that they had. And then we came along to America and made it look like what it looks like today, and brought in these more cult like religions and just brainwashed and indoctrinated everybody to believe that they have to be a certain way and to do everything out of fear. The religions are all fear based. It's not, um, I believe in this, so I'm going to use this for positivity and to heal myself and to heal others. It's, I'm afraid that if I don't live my life the way this higher power said, I'm going to be punished forever. Um, and there's so many different aspects of life in this country where people use fear to control other people. And, I think another problem with that is that it it comes out in a way that's really, I think that you either have to be an atheist or a Christian. So they would rather have you believe in science and, say that there is no, like, magical anything. Everything is just very much what you see is what you get. They want you to either believe that or they want you to be a Christian. Those are the only two options provided. And that kind of represents the other two sides, the blue and the red, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican. They want you to pick a side and they want you to stay there. And it's all laid out for you to choose from. You don't get to have an actual choice for yourself. And that's why, people ask me, what is your religion? I say, I don't have a religion. And they say, oh, are you an atheist? I say, no, I'm not an atheist. And they say, are you agnostic? And I said, no, I'm not agnostic. I don't believe that it's impossible to know if there is or isn't a God. I believe there definitely is, based on logic, and I can explain it. I think that God is just the the higher power that we have to thank for our existence and for our free will. It's that simple. That's all it is. God doesn't have an ego. God doesn't have a personality, doesn't have opinions, just kind of is this inner love that created everything and kind of is within everything at the same time. And that's all that it is. And I could explain it in a lot more detail if you want to understand it more, but that's generally what it is. And it's it's such a rare way to think of things. And I think another thing that is definitely true is that everything is constantly moving and changing, and you can never really know anything. Everything is always moving. The only thing you can be certain of is change. And you have to be able to let go of control and work with that and be more humble instead of so eager to hold on to control and to get all the answers and to make sure you know how to live your life. Because why would you want the answers? Just so you could do the right thing. You want the answers so that you're not doing the wrong thing. It's coming from a place of fear. It's about, I want the answers so I'm not doing the wrong thing. You may say, so I can do the right thing, but that's still coming from a place of fear because there is no such thing as the right thing or the wrong thing. Things just are what they are. And sometimes, I guess you could say the wrong thing is when you harm other people, when you deny the truth and start living in an alternate version of the truth, or an alternate version of not reality. I guess you can't call it the truth. It's not an alternate version of the truth because there's only one version of the truth. But when you deny that and you start living in your own world, that I guess could be the wrong thing. Um, but still, it just kind of is what it is. It's not really good or bad. So if you consider good when you're healthy, when you're happy, when you're taking care of yourself, there are certain things that you can do that will hurt you and certain things you can do that will not hurt you. And you can base that as your morality scale. You can take that as what's right and wrong. But you should not be hating other people or judging other people for any reason. Um, because if the table was turned, you wouldn't want it done to you. It's that simple. Nobody likes being judged. Nobody likes questioning if they're allowed to exist, if there's something wrong with their existence. So why would you want to make someone feel that way? Because you just are so closed off emotionally You've turned yourself into essentially a robot, and that's what these people are trying to do. The people who think that there is an objective right and wrong, and they're always trying not to do the wrong thing. You're living as if you're a robot, as if there's this kind of pre-set way for you to live, this programmed condition you're supposed to follow, and you're trying so hard not to break from that. But that's not reality. You were created and given free will so you could use it, so you could do what you like, and you should be grateful for that. But instead, you just choose to live in fear, and that's kind of like separating from the truth. So that's really just unfortunate. And I encourage people to be okay with the fact that you can never know everything, that eventually you're going to probably learn so much that you feel like you never knew anything. And that's okay. And it's going to keep happening in cycles. Kind of like what I talked about last week. My episode last week was called Cycles. But I was very a little slow last week. I wasn't all there. I wasn't that enthusiastic because I really just I'm so done with this show. I don't really care that much about my video topics anymore because I want to do another show and I keep thinking about that instead. But this one is just dying and it's got 2 episodes left after this one. So I picked a topic that I'm enthusiastic about today, so this would be more interesting for you guys to watch. But there was one thing I wanted to say. I can't remember what it was. I totally lost it. I had it a minute ago, and then I went off on a tangent and I lost it. Actually, I only went off on the tangent because I was trying to remember it while I was doing that, but I still haven't gotten it. Oh yeah. Is about science. How they want you to believe in science or Christianity because they want you to, when I say they, I just mean like our leaders, people who are, and I'm talking about the US right now. I'm sure this applies in its own way to wherever you are in the world, but in the US, it's pretty specific. There's a lot of brainwashing that went on here, and it's really unfortunate because other countries just look at America and they're like, what is going on there? Just a bunch of crazy entitled people who think the worst issues are whether or not you can own a gun or have an abortion, and it's like, get your priorities straight. There's other shit to care about, to worry about, to fight for, and you're busy trying to fight for stuff that just doesn't matter at all, at all. Like it drives me nuts. And other people just look at the US and they're like, what is going on? They look at it in shock and disgust. And from the inside, I can look at it that way too, but it's still, people say, if you don't like it, leave. Well, no, because I don't want to just leave, I don't want to just be part of a mess and then walk away from it and leave it burning. You have to try to make it a better place. Criticisms aren't, I hate this place, I want to leave. Criticisms are, here's how we can make this place better. And let's try to do that because the US is a pretty powerful country. If it goes down, it's going to be taking other places with it. So you can't just say shit like that. But people who say that are the people who live here, the people who like it, and the people who are part of that brainwashing that I'm talking about. But think about how medical professionals and scientists, they kind of benefit from people being unhealthy. They offer health care, but in order for you to need that, you would need to be unhealthy. I think if we switched it to the point where they only got paid when when there were no unhealthy people, they'd have a lot more incentive to heal people. But if having a bunch of unhealthy people meant that they weren't going to get paid, I think that they would be a lot more incentivized to actually do their jobs instead of heal people just enough so that they don't realize that they're not actually getting healed, but not enough to be completely okay and never need to come back. And that applies to doctors, therapists, and anything that could benefit from you having to come back. And there are people who have integrity, I'm not saying everyone in that profession isn't fighting for justice and doesn't have integrity, but a good amount of people who get into that profession don't do it for the right reasons. And then we have law enforcement. And I think they benefit from there being crime. Without crime, they wouldn't really have anything to do. If we just had a completely crime-free country, what would be the point of law enforcement? There wouldn't be. So the reason that people commit so many crimes is because of the lack of mental health care. People don't look inward and do the work on themselves to be healthy and living their best life. They live in fear and they neglect their mental health, and they are like Munchausen by proxy situation with the healthcare professionals and healthcare delivery professionals. I think that's what George Carlin said when he was talking about euphemisms, how people refuse to call things what they are, and it's, you know, a doctor turned into a healthcare delivery professional, and sneakers became running shoes and things like that, and how he put it was that you know, those weren't good examples for what I'm about to say, but that the government invented a language to conceal their sins. And I think it's a, you know, there are a lot of things that people use euphemisms for that really, it's a good point. You think that taking away the N word will take away racism. Well, it doesn't, you know? It doesn't. It just makes other people think that it's not a problem anymore, but it absolutely is. And you can either be asleep to it, or you can wake up and realize what's actually going on. Or you can choose to be angry and call it all a conspiracy and say that the media is trying to push an agenda and make it seem like there is still racism, when in reality, racism is just a thing of the past. Go ahead, believe what you want, but you have to take the consequences of your actions. That's life. You make a decision, you take what that decision comes with. If you try to have it both ways, you're going to hurt yourself even more. You have to say, I have A or B. Don't try to have A and B, because you're going to end up with only one of them, but you're going to think that you have both, or you're going to be like switching back and forth, and just really sad. You know, people can't just say something confidently. They say, you know, when somebody wants to do something that they don't want to have to do, but they feel like they have to, they'll do it guilty. They'll say it guilty, like, can you do this? I hate to ask you. Instead of just, hey, can you do this for me? Because you know this is something that I have to ask you to do. So just, I'm going to ask you to do it, and then just do it. And it's not a big deal. And if you can't do it, then just say that. It doesn't need to be so like, oh, I hate that I have to ask this person to do this, or I hate that I have to do. Just be there. Just understand what circumstances you're in and be okay with it. Stop trying to have things both ways, and just be in the moment, and get rid of the guilt and the shame around everything that you do. It doesn't help. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't undo what you're doing. If you're doing something shamefully, it's not gonna stop what you're doing. You're still doing it. You're just not doing it all the way. It's almost like the worst third option. It's like, you know, if you're gonna do something bad, at least do it confidently. And if you're gonna do something good, do it confidently. But if you're gonna do something bad, and you're gonna do it all shamefully and guilt-ridden and like, oh, I don't know, like, just do it. Like, come on, stop trying so hard. Because it's like deep down you know what's right and wrong, and then other times you're not even doing the wrong thing. You just feel guilty for some reason. And we just need to get rid of guilt, because it doesn't ever accomplish anything. Guilt has never helped anyone. Guilt has never made anyone make the right decision. It just makes people feel like they're doing something wrong. Guilt, at best, is a reminder to pay attention to your gut instinct and to ask yourself if you're really being honest with yourself, or if you're making decisions from a place of fear versus love. Making decisions from a place of fear looks like thinking about what you don't want, outcomes you want to avoid. I don't want to hurt this person. I don't want to see this disaster happen. I don't want to carry these groceries into the house and hurt my arms. I don't want to do this. Or thinking about, I want this person to feel happy. I want this situation to be positive and everyone here to be healthy instead of a disaster. And I want someone to help me. carry these groceries so I don't hurt my arms. And you're when you think so much about what you don't want, you're going lower and you're thinking in a more negative way. And how often do you really just sit and say, look at where I am right now and what I'm doing right now and who's around me right now? Do I really want to be here? Do I really want to be doing this? Do I really want to be around these people? Do I really want to be talking about this topic? People just kind of go and just do things, and they don't really stop and say, do I really want to be doing this? Is this really authentic to who I am? And if you just stop and ask yourself that, you have to also not be afraid of the answer. Because it's okay if the answer is, I don't want to be doing this, I don't want to be here, I don't like these people. That's okay too. You can just make sure you're being honest with yourself. So, yeah, I definitely covered everything I wrote, but I just think it's really important to acknowledge that people kind of tend to go either way when they say that there's no scientific proof of that. You can bring up a part of your belief set, and if it's not Christianity, they'll tell you there's no scientific proof of that. Science doesn't support that. Well, you know what? There's no scientific proof against it either. Science doesn't support it because they don't like it, not because there's proof against it. And this is the thing that I think really pisses me off the most. People so often argue with people. Like, I could use the example of some things that I believe about, like psychic mediumship, being able to telepathically communicate with someone, or hear other people's thoughts, or see an event in the future that hasn't happened yet, or hear someone else's thoughts as if it's your own thought, and use that to communicate with people who aren't alive anymore. And all of these things are real, and it can be proven, but people say science disagrees with it. Well, what is science then? Is science the study and testing of something? Is science just a religion? It's almost like people use science as a religion, which is really weird, because the whole idea of science is that it's supposed to be used to uncover the truth. You're supposed to say, we know that this does this, we put A, mix A with B, and this is what happens. We study this, figure out how this works. We use studies to figure out what the shape of the earth is and how far away it is from the sun, and all these different things that we figure out. And we have units of measurement and study all sorts of things. And yet we say that science doesn't support things that are definitely real. But I think the leading things in this country, America, are either you're a scientist and an atheist, or you're a Christian, you're religious, in that specific religion. Not a lot of other religions are tolerated in this country, unfortunately. And it's really, really sad, because even in this separation of church and state, we still have on money, in God we trust. They still make you swear on a Bible in church. And, that doesn't mean anything to the person swearing on the Bible. Why do you have to put your left hand or your right hand on the Bible, or raise your right hand, or raise your left hand, whatever you have to do? What if you do the wrong hand? What if the Bible's upside down? Like, what if the Bible's backwards and upside down? Does it not count then? Like, at what point does all of this just break down and become nonsense that we just made up? And that, again, is something George Carlin pointed out. Like, if you really look at it, you're like, this is ridiculous. This is just all for show. But it doesn't mean anything. Swearing on a Bible. What the hell is that? It's just nonsense. It's all just nonsense. And it doesn't apply to people who don't believe in it. So there's no reason to be using it in a court system. And people still do, because that's what's in charge here, is that specific religion. And they expect you to believe in it. Or they expect you to believe in science, and they call other things like that magical thinking, even though it works, even though getting in touch with your intuition and things like that have been proven to help people live healthier lives and not really depend on healthcare delivery professionals or doctors and therapists, and they're healthy to a point where they won't be committing crimes. And could you imagine a society of people who are healthy in mind and body and don't commit crimes, think about all the people who are in very high positions of power right now who would be out of jobs in that circumstance. That's terrifying. They don't want that. That's not good for them to have a bunch of mindful, healthy people who are questioning everything and thinking. That's against their interest because they're selfish and they don't see the value in it. There are a lot of things that I think they know, that the government knows, and that, things that they've studied that they're fully aware of because they're not stupid. But they just deliberately hold back. They don't want you to know that, which is why a lot of people are like thinking that they're hiding aliens in Area 51 or whatever it is. Like, people think a bunch of shit is going on behind the scenes, and they're probably right about some of it. I have no reason to think that they're not. In fact, there's a lot of reason to think that they are right, but I think some things are completely ridiculous, like lizard people and other conspiracy theories that are just absolute nonsense. But there are a lot of conspiracy theories that are far from baseless and actually make a lot of sense. But you still have to know what to do about it. You still have to say, okay, well, how does this actually apply to me? What can I do about it? And if you just become paranoid and bitter about the world, that's not helping. And if you also start trying to arrogantly spread what you believe in a way that isn't really helping other people to do something about it either, that's not going to help. You have to make sure that you're thinking logically and you're making sure that you know what to do about it. And I think the best thing to do is focus on what you know for sure. Focus on what you can be certain of, and then everything else will fall into place. So I am certain that they are holding out an information that wouldn't be good for them, that would be good for us. I definitely believe that the government doesn't care about the people at all. I don't think that our leaders care about us. I think that if they did, we would have a bunch of happy people running around this country. But we have a bunch of angry people yelling at each other and insisting that they're right and the other one is wrong. And the only thing everyone can agree on is that something needs to change. Clearly, the leaders do not care about us. That goes without saying, I hope. But everyone is pretty miserable, and it's really sad. And the healthiest people are the ones who have, have kind of a spiritual mindset. And science says, well, that's magical thinking. Science disagrees with that. Show me the proof. Believe me, I've looked, I've studied, I've done a lot of research, and not one person has shown me evidence that contradicted anything I believe. They've tried, but I've looked into it and said that doesn't contradict it. Why do you think that's evidence against it? If anything, that supports it. And I've had to tell that to people so many times. And I'm still waiting on the day someone sends me proof that things I believe are not accurate or not based in reality. It's never happened, and it's never going to happen because it is reality. There's a lot of proof for it, but people just don't want to believe that. And people are really, they get really nasty too. Like, people will call you mentally ill and think that you're crazy. People get locked up for believing things like they can talk to dead people, or it gets labeled as schizophrenia. Like, there's all sorts of things that happen. People end up getting in a lot of trouble for things like that. It's really sad, but it's just a reality that we're living in, and we have to be aware of it, and we have to try to confidently talk about it and spread awareness and stop being so afraid, because it's just not time for that anymore. The time to be afraid was a long time ago. If anything, there was never a time to be afraid, but it's definitely, that time has passed. It was never there, but still, it's not an option anymore. Because we're really like running out of time to turn this problem around, and I think if we continue to think the way that we're thinking, we're gonna end up killing each other, which would be unfortunate. But like I said, you have to just be okay with things for what they are, and just say it is what it is. If that's what ends up happening, then we brought it on ourselves. Nothing is objectively good or bad. So, happy Pride Month. Sorry for being so dark in this episode and covering a lot of dark things, but I just needed to talk about what was on my mind. And I figured for Pride Month, I'll give you an episode about why pride is still important. Pride is what minorities use to celebrate that they have made a lot of progress in fighting for being treated like regular people instead of like this alternate choice for a way of being. You know, there's the main choice and then there's the other choice. Instead of these are your two choices, it's this is the right choice and then there's the other choice. And there's so many more than two, but that's kind of what people think. You're either gay or straight. A lot of people still think that. And it's interesting, even people who aren't against being gay are still again, like J.K. Rowling, for example. She does not support transgender people, and yet she is not homophobic because um, I guess her character from Harry Potter, Dumbledore, is gay, and she made a gay character and is still not fully in support of the LGBT community. And I guess other things that she's done that I'm not fully aware of because I don't really care that much to look into it. But that's one thing that I am aware of, and it's just interesting to me how so many people can support different aspects of it until it becomes inconvenient for them, until it becomes easier for them to believe something else. And it's all about ego. It's all about what you want, and it's not really based on empathy. So I think of ego as just a version of yourself that you create, and it's based on things that you learn, things that you see, things that you hear, and it's based on your fears, based on what you don't want. It's sort of a persona that you create, and the reason that it's possible to damage someone's ego, for someone to take a blow to their ego, is because it's not real. If it were real, it couldn't be damaged. So, yeah, it's not based in reality. It's a fake version of yourself, and all you are without it is just love, because we're all connected, and that's what love is. Love is connection. Love is positivity, is understanding that we're all cut from the same cloth, and empathy is always going to matter more, and ego is kind of the opposite of that. So people do things from a place of ego all the time. Their heads get big and they think, oh, hey, people like me, people like what I'm doing, what I'm talking about. I'm gonna, grab onto that and run off with it, and then they don't stop and say, but was I supposed to be doing something else? Yeah, you were. You were, because you're not thinking about other people anymore now. You just think that you're the shit, and that that's all that matters. And eventually you're going to have to come to terms with reality and see that that doesn't matter at all. Nobody cares except you, and you won't forever. So, yeah, I think I've summed it up. Pride Month is important, basically, because people have been discriminated against, and we've fought for a lot of rights and equality and justice, and we're allowed to celebrate that. But if you can, I really wouldn't feed into a lot of the companies that are selling rainbow shit. I if you like it, that's one thing, but I really would generally try to stay away from that. And that applies to everything. Like, just don't be spending money you don't have and things you don't need. Be a little bit more careful with where you spend your money, and make sure that it's coming from a place of self-respect and obedience. Like, you could be obedient with your diet, with your sleeping schedule, with all sorts of things, and it makes you feel better about your life. You feel like you kind of have a hold on things, and you know what you're doing, and you're not being spontaneous and listening to your first impulse. So that's just really, I think, a really important thing that a lot of people don't think about. Just keep that in mind. Try to make sure you're valuing your self-respect over your first impulses and your initial wants, because it actually feels better when you want to do something and then you decide not to do it. You feel empowered. You feel like, hey, I'm not a victim of my wants. I have control over it. I can choose not to. So that's a better feeling. So just own that. And good luck with life and everything. See you next week.